That thing where we like vamp for a minute, like we're waiting for people to come on. Hi everybody, we're just sort of waiting for people to come into the live stream. Oh, and I need to start the recording on the audio interface. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just start the podcast just like we normally would, and then I will bring you in pretty early on for the intro. We'll just sort of chat a little bit, and then we'll jump into the first segment.
All right.
Hello. Welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection between writing and fandom. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'm your host. I'm joined today with Kirsha Fox. I'm going to go to bring her in because she's sitting right next to me, and it would be awkward if I just did this whole monologue without her involved at all. So we're coming to you live from Drunken Monkey Coffee Bar in Orlando, Florida. And we're just sort of here to chat about her book and our writing processes and all that kind of stuff. So, Kirsha, how has your day been and what's going on today?
It's been a pretty good day. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, so Kirsha and I know each other from the Sub Radio Discord. Sub Radio is a band that we're both super into, and we met that way. So it's interesting to meet in person because we've known each other for like a year now, right?
Yeah, we've been friends for a long time.
And it feels like longer than a year, truthfully, right?
Yes, it does.
Because I feel like Sub Radio is all-consuming. So whenever you become into it, it becomes like your entire personality.
It's a new family. Welcome to your new family.
Yeah. And it has been very that, right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure many of them are now. I'm sure our Sub Radio fam are watching. So we're going to be... there's comments there that I'm not reading because they're too far away. I'll read those later, guys. But we're going to be talking about writing process. And the main thing we're talking about is Kirsha's upcoming book, or already released, right?
Released, yeah.
So she just came out with the sequel to Son of Deception, which is the Whiteleaf. So this is the first
Son
book.
of Deception, first book.
And then her second book is...
The Whiteleaf Child, and it came out in April.
And that's going to be what we're talking about today. And the main thing I wanted to talk about was the process of developing a sequel. Because we talked a lot about, like, developing... like what got you into writing in the beginning and like what got you here. So then what sort of inspired you to continue? What was that process like building a second book?
Yeah, sure. When I first sat down and I'm going to write a book, I was really only intending to just write the first book. That was my goal, finish the first book. I didn't really have very much of a plan going forward after that. But my book got way too big. It was a monster. It was more than double the words you're supposed to have for a book. So I went through and I tried to clean it up, but there was still way too much. So I broke it up into 2 books. So I published the first book and I was working on the second book, and it did it again, where I just had way too much plot. I was trying to fit too much in there, and I broke it up again, and now I'm working on the third book. So it's a trilogy of what was only really supposed to be one book. But,
so I was going to talk to you about planning a series and stuff, because because I'm planning a series right now, and I'm planning to step back and do the big picture, what are the big plot points that need to happen. So you sort of unintentionally planned a trilogy. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
So talk a little bit about what sort of got out of hand, what got so big about it, what made it get so big.
The characters got bigger. The more I wrote them, the more I got to know them. The more they told me their secrets, the more background they started having. They grew. They're like, hey, let's go have a side adventure over here. I'm like, okay, let's go have the side adventure. It's important for your character growth. Let's do it.
So you talked a bit about your characters last time. Tell us about your characters in the Whiteleaf Child.
It's the same 2 main characters, but an important change with the Whiteleaf Child is a good portion of it happens in the Wild Realm, where the Fae live. Book, the main character, who calls himself Book, used to work for a Fae queen, the Winter Queen. And now that he's back, returned, such as it is, she's like, so, hey, you want to come work for me again? And there's this big mystery he's trying to solve about his first life that it gets very twisty and tangly.
And is that kind of the big thing that really got bigger? You started realizing more about... Or is this the thing that you planned all along? And that's you know what I'm saying? Is this the plot point that you were like, oh, this is the first book, and then it grew into?
Yes, that's it. Yeah. Details that I didn't exactly have 100% together, came together. You just have these moments of, oh my gosh, that just fits perfectly, and then you put it in, and it looks like you were doing it on purpose the whole time. And then also, I want to say, when writing the series, I have been writing the first, the second, and the third book at the same time. So if I make a change in book 3 that I want to happen, I can go back to book 1 and put that in, and then I get that proper foreshadowing.
Yeah, so I sort of unintentionally did that also with this book, because I'd written a novel that I planned to come out next year, and the book coming out soon, Tyranny of the Fae, is essentially a prequel to that, and more of like side stories and stuff.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying. Like, it is interesting to be able to pull from your already written material to make sure that it's consistent, but then also you already have that world building done, and that's nice, you know.
Yes.
And then whenever you come up with interesting things to do, like in your new work that you didn't think of the first time, you're like, oh, well, I can go back and add that in because, you know, it's not out yet. And it doesn't exist in the world yet.
So now that the first 2 books are out, I do have like a big document of all of my untied strings. You know, all the little hints, everything, what ideas I had for going forward with those, so that I don't conclude the trilogy without wrapping those up. I don't want a reader to come back to me and be like, so what happened with that thing that you never resolved? So you just have to stay very organized.
Yeah, and it's a thing that I'm legitimately concerned about with this book, because, you know, like, you did a bunch of editing for me recently, and there's a ton of things that will probably be resolved eventually, but, like, not for several books down the road. So it's an interesting thing that, like, I'm worried that people are going to be into these characters, and it's like, well, just stay tuned. In 3 more books, you're going to see these characters again.
Yes. You're like, I promise this is important. I've included this for a reason. It's important. You need to know it now. Yeah. Stay with us.
So, what has it been like? So we always like to talk about the sort of like indie side of it too, like the background of just being an indie creative and like what that process is like. So how has like promotion been and stuff? Just sort of talk a little bit about like what you have done, what you would like to do, that kind of stuff.
It's my absolute kryptonite. What's that thing where you're productive as a form of procrastination? Yeah, I do that a lot. My house gets very clean, or I'll sit down and write, or I'll take on another editing job, or I'll like anything but marketing. But I am starting to buckle down and kick my own butt into marketing. I do some stuff on TikTok once in a while. I'm most active on Facebook, and just overcoming that fear to actually reach out to people and be like, hey, you bought the first book. Did you enjoy it? I have another book.
Yeah.
Would you like the second book now? Because it might not be on their radar.
Did you do any of the like advanced reader copies, like that kind of stuff, before the release?
I have my street team. Yeah. I have about half a dozen of very trusted ARC readers who I can trust to give me like really good feedback. There's one who's just absolutely ruthless. She does not let me get away with anything, and I mean, like, I will cry, but then I'll get up and make my book better.
Yeah. So I just finished the ARC process, the first round of it for this book. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about just sort of like what it, because there could be people watching that have no idea what an ARC reader even is.
Sure.
So that might be kind of fun to talk about. So just to talk about the definition. So an ARC is an advanced reader copy. So an ARC reader is somebody that has an advanced copy, and the point of it is to get reviews and stuff before the book is released. The point of it is so you have, like, it's for you for promo purposes, so you can like make graphics with those reviews on it or whatever. But then also so that like Goodreads and Amazon actually physically have reviews on them, so that people can see that, you know, people have already read your book and they liked it, or they didn't, or people at least have read it, you know.
Yes.
So
I've heard, I don't know a way to confirm this, but I've heard that Amazon will not market or push a book at anybody unless it has at least 50 reviews. So
yeah, so even if you can bank like 10 or something in the ARC phase, it's helpful for an indie
very
book.
helpful. Every review is gold to an indie writer.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about like how you got your team together, and then I'll talk a little bit about how like I got my random assortment of readers together, and then we can sort of compare notes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've met mine various ways. I am pretty active on like an author services swap Discord and Facebook group, where we're like, it's about helping each other rather than paying for services. So I'll do an edit on someone else's book, and she'll do an edit on mine. And a lot of those that I've done have bloomed into friendship, where we love each other's books, we're asking each other's advice. We, it's about making friends with people whose advice you trust.
Yeah. So, what sort of like, how has it been getting the feedback and stuff? Because I mean, like, it's amazing, but it's also like, I noticed early on whenever I started getting my first reviews that like if one line was like minorly critical, then I'm like, well, this is the worst review I'm ever gonna get, and I shouldn't have even bothered to write a book, So what has that been like?
You have to grow the thickest of skins. It's so hard to hear anything bad about your baby. It's your precious baby that you labored over for a year or more, and just put so much love into it. Especially, there are some reviewers who, if they love the book, they will only give you 4 stars. It has to be the best book they've ever read, ever, to give it 5 stars. And that can be a bit disheartening to an indie author who, you tried so hard. You're like, what did I do wrong? But sometimes you didn't do anything wrong, and sometimes it just wasn't the right book for them. They're just not your audience. So
yeah, and I think there's something interesting about people that are like, that do this a lot, that like are ARC readers, is that they are harsher on their scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like whenever I review a book, it's kind of like, did I enjoy it? 4 or 5 stars.
Yes,
like I enjoy 4 or 5 stars in almost everything I read, just because it's like I wouldn't write a review if it, if I wouldn't give it a 4 or 5 stars, I wouldn't bother to write it. But we're asking them to, so like they have to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where I think you expect people to give your book 4 stars, but 3 stars are good. You know what I mean? Like they're saying this is as good as any other book in this genre that's out right now.
And I had a dear friend say, hey, I didn't love your book. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I'd give it 3 stars. And I was like, do it. Absolutely do it. If it's 3 stars, still do it. Because when people are shopping for my book, they're going to see that I got a variety of different stars. It's going to be more widely read. It's more trustworthy that way. I think if you go to someone's book and they only have 5-star reviews, that looks really sus.
It looks like their friends and family went on there.
Yes, it does.
Reviews.
So I was like, absolutely do it. Give me 3 stars. I will take it.
Yeah, and I mean, it is interesting to get perspective from, like, because as writers, I think that we want 5 stars for everything, right? Like, that's what you want to happen. But, like, I was recently at a conference with other English teachers, and things happened, and it came up in conversation that I was an author, and then they were all like, this room full of English teachers were freaking out because it was like, an author's in the room. And then they put up my book on Goodreads, and they were like, and it has a positive review, and it has a 3.25, which doesn't seem positive to me, but it's interesting that, like, other people do think of it that way, So yeah, the way that I got my team together, just to kind of break this down for people, so I made a video, like, designed to be sort of like a more virally video, that's just like, if you like this, and this, and this, then you might like my book, and then to get them to sign up for ARC copies. And that was my main strategy, but then I sort of just posted it everywhere. And I feel like and I had like a Google form that people would fill out, and that's how I sort of got contact with people. And I feel like my readers came from kind of everywhere. Because I got some from TikTok, some from Twitter, some from like these like groups on Discord, and various, and none of it was consistent. And like anytime somebody like expressed the slightest interest in my book, I was like, oh, then you should sign up to get an ARC copy. So I have a lot of like new contacts now, just from this process, which is interesting and kind of fun to meet people that way. And it's people that I would have never like reached out to personally, you know what I'm saying? Which I think is very nice, that I have like these people that are into my book, or at least have read my book now, that maybe I would have never met had it not been for this process. So I think that those open calls are good for that purpose. Have you done any of that kind of stuff?
I have not done very much in the way of open calls. I've kept my manuscripts pretty close to my chest, only really giving it to people that I really trusted. There's always, worries about piracy or I was just really close about it. And if I could do it again, I would definitely be a lot more open. I would have really been louder about my book, but I was still pretty insecure about it, and most of the time I'm still like, thank you so much for reading my garbage. It's really not. They're good. They're good books. But there's that inside voice of like, thank you for reading my garbage. I hope you enjoyed it. Right.
Yeah, and so my main goal, and that's why the video that was like, if you like these things, you might like my book. Yeah. Because the thing that I heard a lot was you want people that will like your book to read it. You know what I mean? because you want to find your audience. You don't just want to find like anybody. Because I mean, early on, it kind of feels like you're just like, please, somebody, anyone, buy my book and read it. But like it was saying for ARC readers specifically, like you really want to get people that will enjoy it. That way, they will leave more positive reviews. You know,
yeah, getting ARC readers can be really tricky. You'll send out 100 copies of your book, maybe 5% of those people actually like read it.
Yeah,
and then like fewer still will actually leave you a review or make a video about you or recommend you. It's a little disheartening sometimes. I did a read for another author, and she had 20 people sign up. I was the only one who actually read the book and gave her feedback. Like
yeah. So I had 25 for this book, and I will admit I've not followed up yet. So like because the book doesn't come out the next month, like a couple months from now. So like I have time to play around still. But I've already gotten like 3 people to post about it, which is like, it's always really cool
good.
to like see people, like they posted videos on TikTok and just like getting tagged in those, when they're at least a littlest bit positive is like really touching to see somebody. It's interesting how whenever I see it written on Goodreads, because like one of them literally posted the review on Goodreads and then kind of repeated it on TikTok. On Goodreads, I singled in on like the sentence that was like critical, and I was like, this person hated my book. And then on TikTok, like the criticisms they had was just kind of like, I just wanted more of it. Like I was hoping that there was more, you know, because they were saying that like it wasn't long enough or fleshed out, and they just wanted more of it. And that's not a criticism. That's like, I loved it so much, I wanted more of it, you know? So it's interesting, like when you see their face, it's less hurtful. You know what I mean?
Yes. There's something about the faceless internet that, and text in general, when you can't see how they're saying it or whatnot. Yeah.
And I feel like that's maybe something about Book Talk that is interesting, and that's why it's probably blown up, is because like you are seeing people's genuine reactions to books, you know, and not just because like people. I feel like before Goodreads and like Instagram was kind of the way people posted things. It was all just like text, you know, in the descriptions or whatever.
Yeah, text and artsy photos.
So I feel like, you know, Book Talk really has kind of blown up, like just seeing people's reactions to things.
Oh yeah, I love the community. Like I feel like it's really a community of people helping other people, readers and authors connecting and getting to know each other in a way that we had never had before. Before, an author was just a name on the front of the book. Like they might have a picture on the back. You didn't know who any of it was. And now you can find your favorite authors on TikTok and know probably a lot more about them than they should put on the internet. But it's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I'm going to go and take a quick break, and we'll come right back. And TikTok, we're not actually going to take a break. We're going to like fictionally take a break, and we're going to come back and then like do the second segment. So just, I'm going to finish saying this, but then we're going to just go right into the second segment. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to talk about writing style. Welcome back to Most Writers Are Fans. I'm joined once again with Kirsha Fox. We're going to talk about like a writing style and how you develop your own personal style. So how do you feel like, talk a little bit about like how you feel like you've kind of like navigated this with your writing.
I think it just sort of is something that you develop as you practice it, as you do more of it. You find a beat that works for you. I think it also sort of depends on who your author influences are. What books are you reading that will program your brain to write that particular way? Your background, the way you were taught, you know.
Yeah.
It all feeds into it.
Yeah, so the reason that this came to my mind is, so I did a video a bit ago about how my editor that I hired to copy edit my book basically put a flurry of mistakes in it. Kirsha actually was the one that discovered them and was like, hey, do you want to know about these? And I was like, it is a couple errors, like whatever, like even professionally published books have a couple errors, like it's not a big deal. And she was like, oh, you may want to know about this one. So
yes, absolutely, yes. Even like the most edited books, you will still find mistakes, typos, things that happen, but it was a little concerning.
Yeah. So I did a bit of research and I found out that basically they were adding errors to my book. Like she referenced me an error and I looked it up in the manuscript and
he had it right.
Yeah, the way that I wrote it was correct.
They did it
The way
wrong.
that they wrote it was incorrect.
Yes.
So I was then like freaking out and I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna have a poorly edited book out in the world. But then Kirsha volunteered to edit it for me, and that was like a lifesaver just to have somebody to do it. And I've been going through these edits recently, and there's a lot of things I've noticed that are like my style, that are not just like grammatically, like whether it's grammatically correct or not is kind of irrelevant. Like it's things that I specifically do, and it really got me thinking about like how you kind of like recognize those things, because I don't think as I'm writing it I even think about it.
No.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's like your own particular accent. It's your voice. It's who you are. It's part of your voice. So that comes out through writing as well. So there are ways that you can learn a different accent or erase the one you grew up with, but it's the same way with writing, where it's a deliberate choice, for sure.
And I feel like there's something about like authors having a distinctive style that, not that so I'll talk about the author that must not be named. I won't say her name.
Sure.
But I read her book after the Magic Boy series that she wrote, and it felt like, as a fan of those books, it felt sort of like coming home to me, because like it was still her writing style, you know.
Oh, yes.
And I think that that's something that as a fan, like, it doesn't matter if it's the same characters, it doesn't matter if it's the same world, it doesn't matter, like if it's the same style, you sort of kind of, you're getting into the same thing that you loved about them, you know.
Yes.
So that's why I feel like understanding your style and then figuring out how to make it consistent is useful as a writer.
I noticed that you had a style guide that you sent me, and I was very impressed, because a lot of new authors do not know about style guides. I didn't learn until I was almost completely done with the first book.
Yeah, so this is a journey, right? But I had teachers from my school that I work at agree to edit the book for me, and then they just never, they're teachers, so we're busy, like,
Yeah.
I didn't hold it against them. But I made that for them because it was 4 separate editors that were doing it. I didn't want them to, like, inconsistently, you know, edit it. Because, you know, if they did, because some of them, like, the thing that I did, this was like a weird fantasy thing that we can get into. So, fantasy races or fantasy species are one of these things where do you capitalize them or not? And I think it's tricky because, you know, like, humans you wouldn't typically capitalize in most any circumstance. But we live in a world where humans are the only prominent race, right?
Yes.
So like, you know, you wouldn't capitalize the humans, but you would capitalize the Americans, you know, or the Europeans or whatever. So whenever I would say the humans, it was like, well, this probably should be capitalized because I would have capitalized the elves, you know, as like a group of people, because they had a distinctive culture that was theirs, that was separate.
Your main characters, for the most part, were elves. Of course, they would think of humans as something different and special and unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it was like, well, why do should I capitalize it sometimes and not other times? Because like grammatically there would be times when you wouldn't, and sometimes you would, right? But I decided that like it just made more sense to just always capitalize all of them, because then it can be consistent, you know.
Yes. Consistency really is the most important thing when you're deliberately breaking a rule or setting your own style.
Yeah, so that was a thing that I sort of, and I felt like that was just an interesting grammar question, because like it's not a thing you can just answer from a non-fantasy context, you know, because there's not a context for it without fantasy or sci-fi. So, and the thing that I have especially ran into a lot, you'll recognize this immediately, is there was a lot of, in my manuscript I did O.K. for the word okay, and whenever I would have a number, if it was above 10, I would use it as a number, like I would use the numerals. And the reason for that is I have a background in journalism, and in the AP Style Guide, that is how you do it. And it is different in literature, typically. But I sort of made this decision as I was going through the edits that like I wanted to keep that, because as somebody with a background in journalism, it's part of who I am, it's part of my writer journey, so I wanted to keep that as part of my style, as something that makes me distinctive, you know? What are other things like that you've noticed in your writing?
Something that a different author pointed out to me that I do a lot is how I write dialogue, where I'll do the first part of the dialogue and then have like a little bit of action between, and then they'll continue what they're saying. I do that quite a lot, so I've been having to like keep an eye on it to make sure that it isn't the only way that I'm ever doing dialogue. I try to be careful with my dialogue tags. If I can erase it and it still makes sense and you know who's talking, I'll just erase it.
Oh, and dialogue tags are my bane of existence, because as a journalist, you only ever use said. Only ever. Because, like, you want to be as clear as possible. You don't want to, like, muddy the waters. So whenever somebody gives you a quote, you just say, this person said. and you say that every time. So whenever I first wrote like my first novel, every single person was this person said, this person said, this person said after everything. I never used anything that was more descriptive, just because like that was, and I feel like that's one of those times when it's like, well, the way that I'm doing this isn't as exciting or interesting for people. So like I need to change this part of my style because like it doesn't fit this genre.
Oh yeah, you used all of the dialogue.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to hear you say that because I read your book and you had so much fun with all the dialogue tags, and it was really refreshing to see that because it is. I know a lot of people who default to said. They're like, unless it has to be something else, it should always be said. And it makes me a little sad, like sometimes. I'm like, but there's so many good dialogue tags, you know?
Yeah.
Add some flavor to their dialogue if you can.
And I think it's because I'm so intentional about it. Because I mean, like, because I did that a bit whenever I wrote it initially, but then also my developmental editor told me, like, these tags are getting pretty repetitive, you may want to change it up. And that's whenever I started doing things like, I would like have action that I would describe instead of the character said.
Yes.
Just to kind of like imply this character is the one we're focusing on now, so they're saying this thing.
It's an action tag now.
And it was a thing that I didn't even like think to use before. And that's a thing that like the editor kind of like helped me see. Which is, again, maybe that's another good tip is like, you need to get an editor. Like doing this on your own is rough.
Always get an editor. You are blind to things that you would not have even thought about because you're there. You're in your head. You know what everything looks like. You know how they're doing it. You don't always say it. You don't always put it down. No, you need as many eyes on your manuscript as you can get. You know, get the beta readers, get the editor, get the ARC readers. Just like every single person who reads your book is going to make it better.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't, they're maybe like aspiring writers and don't know these things, like there are different kinds of editors, and I think it's important to understand that. So like a developmental editor is somebody that goes in after you've written it and like works on the structure. Like this doesn't work, or you need more context here, or like this thing is not long enough, or like this character hasn't been like described well, and that's like the grammar and stuff is kind of irrelevant at that point because you still haven't written the final work. Like they're helping you kind of like finish it in a way that makes the most sense. And then like a copy editor, which is what Kirsha did in this most recent time, is like going through and what I was looking for.
Yeah, yes. I might have been more than you were asking for sure.
I think that you had fun doing some developmental things. but like a copy editor is like putting in commas and like capitalizing things and all that kind of stuff.
Making sure it's grammatically correct. Yes.
And I mean, and that's hard because things like verb tense and stuff is like hard to always be consistent with. And it's easy to just kind of like slip into something incorrect. And again, like you said, like when you wrote it, like you've read it 100 times, so it's right to you, you know? So you got to have another set of eyes to look at it.
You have to do tricks to trick your mind. You have to change the font. You have to read it out loud. You have to read it in a different place than you're used to, like, or on a different format, print it out. Like there's all kinds of tricks you have to do to make it fresh and new to your mind. A lot of authors, when they finish, they'll put it away. They won't even look at it for a month, just to make sure it's fresh in their mind when they're reading it with new eyes.
Yeah. And that's what it's been like lately, because I've been so busy doing promotion stuff with this book that I've not read it as actively. So going back through these tags, it was nice to kind of like get to reread it again. And you know, like the audiobook for my book will be posted for pre-release very soon, but the voice, the narrator, has been like giving me updates regularly, and also that's been interesting. Where I haven't been reading it, it's been interesting to listen back and like hear it in a way that I didn't write it. You know, like there's moments that were like emotional, or moments like that she would say lines, and I was like, oh, that's actually really good, and that's fun to hear because like I wouldn't have noticed that, you know, without that.
Someone else's voice or flavor, it's nice to hear it back to you yourself and be like, that's good. I like that. It's a good feeling.
And just like little, and like there were like full circle things that I didn't know that I intentionally did. I might have intentionally did it, but like I didn't notice I was doing it. And then I like listened back and I was like, oh, like this actually connects back to this thing that I did earlier. And like it's fun to notice those things that like make it stronger and like was already there without me having to like go back in and do it.
Yes.
Are there things like that you've noticed in your work, like when you've read it back, it's like, oh, this is actually really good?
Yeah. sometimes you're just reading and you forget that you're supposed to be looking at it critically. You just start reading it, and then you're like, oh, no, I'm editing. You have to catch yourself a little bit. But those are really good feel-good moments. Or when you get to a place that you're just really proud of how it turned out. It's so shiny, it's so perfect. It just feels so good. But yeah, the advice is to write the book you want to read, right?
Yeah.
You better, because you're going to read it
A
100 times before anybody else ever sees it. So.
And more than you think you will. Like
You will
even
read it so
with
many
the
times.
expectations you're gonna read it 100 times, you're still gonna read it
Yes.
even more than that. And then, like I said, like you'll be listening to it because like I don't want the narrator to I don't want to not listen to it before it's released. You know, so like even that's gonna be a way that I read it. Like with the editors and things, like you go over the notes, you're gonna be reading it another time like that, and then like you're gonna be rewriting it. I'm sure. Like it's a whole journey. I mean, I wrote this a year, like most of last year was whenever I wrote it, but then it was in like September that I started getting it edited, and I've not stopped until now. You know, like it's been it's been almost a year now since I started editing it. So it's one of those things where I think that you think you write a book and then you're done, but like you're super not.
You're super not. Yes, unless, I mean, I have met other authors, I use that term loosely, who just write a manuscript and post it. And I'm a little mildly horrified by that. But like, I don't think that you can really expect to grow your audience if you're not putting out quality work. So
Well, and I think
you
that
kind of have to.
And the thing that's frustrating about that
can't
is
cut
that's
corners on it.
what gives like self-publishing indie writers a bad name.
Yes.
Is like because there are people that just sort of like throw up whatever they wrote.
Mm-hmm.
But then too, a lot of those writers don't even like try to promote it a lot of times. Like they're happy that they wrote a book and they put it online and then it exists, and if anybody buys it by like stumbling
Yeah.
onto it somehow, then like they're happy with that. And I mean, like I'm not criticizing those
Yeah, that's
people
true.
because
That's
like for
kinda
those
what your
people
goals are.
it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you're actually promoting it actively, like you should have some at least a kind of quality product. You know, you
Yes.
should have at least put some work into
It
it.
should be the best that you can possibly put out, for sure. Yes.
Yeah, so any sort of like final thoughts about like editing or writing or style that like or talk about your book at all? You want to do like a pitch for the you can pitch the first one if you want, because there may be people that haven't read the
That's
first
where
one yet.
people will be starting, for sure. Yeah, Son of Deception. There it is again. I had a lot of fun with the artist making that cover, for sure. There were so many drafts on that, trying to get the characters just right, just the right proportion, because Alaric the Paladin here is significantly taller than the other character, but yeah, it can be kind of fun to talk about, hard to talk about the book, because the characters wake up without any of their memories. So anything I tell you about them is already a spoiler.
Yeah.
But I can tell you they wake up in coffins and are ruined. They have none of their memories. They're really confused. They've died and they're offered a second chance at like earning another life. So they have to go on this mission to earn this second life, this chance to live again. And there's just shenanigans happen, and it's so much bigger than they ever imagined.
And give us some physical description, because that wouldn't be a spoiler, right?
Oh no, it wouldn't at all. Alaric is a dragon person. He's got a tail, he's got brown scales, he's got a very dragon face. He's called a dragonkin, which is somewhat D&D in origins. I'm an avid D&D player. And then there's the Fiend Kid, the half-demon, who calls himself Book. He's got a real name, but that's his nickname. He's got curly white hair and these, ram horns on either side of his head. So it's kind of fun that I chose two non-human main characters. Book is half human, but he doesn't necessarily think of himself as a normal human.
Yeah.
So yeah, they say write what you know. I wrote two male characters who are both not human, so
I wrote a book all about women, so so I fully understand.
Yes.
But I mean, I remember whenever I got my English degree, whenever I was in my creative writing class, they challenged us to write a person that was different than us, like if you're a man, write a woman, whatever. And it really stuck with me because it is interesting, because I think that you look at it more critically when you do that, because like you want to write it well. And I think that you think more about it than if you're writing somebody just like you know? Because also I feel like when you write somebody just like you, it's easy to leave a lot of stuff out, because you know,
Yes.
and other people don't.
Yes, absolutely true. I have, let's see, my co-host Julia, she's half Korean, and there's sometimes when I've been reading her things that I kind of ask her, I'm like, oh, this isn't what I recognize. Is this a Korean thing? She goes, yes, it's a Korean thing, but I would never have thought about that. And she didn't think about that either, because that's her default.
Yeah.
That's not my default. And it's fun, the things that you can learn about other cultures or whatnot when you're doing research for your books or writing your own thing. Yeah, so in that case, you can employ sensitivity readers who are, you know, obviously I'm not going to find a half demon or a dragonkin, but I can do my best. I can have, you know, men read it and say, hey, is this how men are?
Yeah, and I mean, like, for my novel, so Karuk, the character in my book, that is, like, sort of, like, indigenous coded. I think I use the word indigenous, so it's barely coded. She's going to be a bigger character in the novel, so I do want to have a sensitivity reader read that, because, like, I want to make sure that, since I'm writing a character who is, you know, from a culture that is very much not mine, I want to make sure that it checks out, you know? Even though it's fantasy, like, that's still, I'm using as an allegory, still, like...
Yes.
But still the same thing, you know?
If you're pulling from a particular flavor, you want to get as close to that as you can and get feedback on that to make sure that you're doing it service and not a disservice by accident, for sure. But yeah, I had a few men read it and they said, yeah, this is close enough. I have a lot of fun with Book where oftentimes I will cast him in the traditional feminine role because he's like the sidekick, he's smaller. He's the more magic-y person. So I have a lot of fun putting a male character in a situation where usually a female character would find herself. And it's a lot of fun to play between the two of them.
All right, well, before we go, I'm going to grab the phone and just see what comments we have, because there might be some that we can respond to.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
All right, so someone asked, what's the book about, which we did answer, and then people have shared and liked it. So that's so if anybody has anything to ask now, feel free. Otherwise, I think we're about to wrap up. So Kirsha, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go to do that?
You can find me on TikTok at Kirsha Fox. You can find me on Facebook at Kirsha Fox. Everywhere Kirsha Fox, KirshaFox.com. I'm the only one with that name as far as I know.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for putting this together and having me. This was a blast.
Well, I'm sure I'll talk to you again very soon.
Yes.
Thanks. Right. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining. You going?
Is she going?
Yeah.
That guy's reading.